AITA for refusing to help my brother after he burned all his bridges. Even though my parents are begging me to, I'm the youngest of 3 siblings. My older sister, Lisa, is a successful lawyer, happily married, and lives in another state. My older brother, Jake, has always been the black sheep of the family. Ever since we were kids, he was the one getting into trouble, skipping school, getting into fights, lying about everything. My parents always made excuses for him, saying he was just going through a phase or that boys will be boys. Meanwhile, Lisa and I were expected to behave, study hard, and be responsible. When Jake was a teenager, he started getting into more serious trouble, stealing, drinking, and even getting arrested a few times. My parents bailed him out every single time. They covered for him, paid his fines, and even lied to family members about why he wasn't in school or why he had to switch jobs so often. Despite all of this, I still tried to have a relationship with him. I was younger, and he was my big brother. I looked up to him, even when I knew I shouldn't. But the older I got, the more I realized that Jake was never going to change because he never faced real consequences. When he was 19, my parents paid for him to go to college. He lasted 1 semester before he flunked out, blaming unfair professors and bad luck. My parents shrugged it off and let him live at home while they helped him find a job. He got fired from that job, and the next, always blaming his bosses, his coworkers, or bad luck again. Meanwhile, I worked my ass off in high school, got into a good college, and paid my own way through scholarships and part-time jobs. By the time I graduated, Jake was in his late 20s, still living with my parents, still job hopping, still making excuses. At this point, Lisa had already gone no contact with him. She got tired of him calling her for money, showing up drunk to family events, and ruining every holiday with his drama. I didn't blame her, but I still felt guilty for cutting him off. Things came to a head when my parents decided to retire early. They told Jake he needed to move out because they were selling the house and downsizing. He threw a fit, called them selfish, and accused them of abandoning him. They ended up delaying their move by almost a year just to give him more time to get on his feet. He used that time to do absolutely nothing. Then came the final straw. My parents finally sold their house and moved to a smaller place in a different city. They gave Jake some money to help him out, enough for rent and expenses for a few months. Instead of using it wisely, he blew it all on gambling, alcohol, and whatever else he does with his time. Within 2 months, he was broke and homeless. He started calling my parents nonstop, demanding more money. When they refused, he showed up at their new house, banging on the door, screaming at them, calling them terrible parents. My dad nearly had a heart attack from the stress. They finally told him they were done. No more money, no more bailouts. That's when he turned to me. I got the sob story. He was struggling. He had nowhere to go. He just needed a little help. I told him no. I work hard for what I have, and I'm not about to throw it away on someone who refuses to help himself. He called me selfish, just like he called my parents. He accused me of thinking I was better than him because I had a stable job and a place to live. Then my parents called me, begging me to help him. They said they felt guilty, that he was still their son, and that they couldn't live with the idea of him being homeless. I reminded them that they made this choice because he put them through hell. They agreed, but still begged me to at least let him stay with me for a little while. I refused. I know exactly how this will go. He'll stay just for a little while. He won't look for a job. He'll make excuses. And then when I finally get fed up, he'll turn on me just like he turned on them. I told them I wouldn't do it, and now they're making me feel like the worst person in the world. I don't think I owe Jake anything. He had every opportunity to get his life together, and he wasted all of them. But now my parents won't stop calling, saying that family is family and that I should at least give him one last chance. AITA for refusing to help him? If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more awesome videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. Thanks for your support. AITA for telling my girlfriend I'm not comfortable with her becoming friends with her ex. I, 28M, have been in a relationship with my girlfriend, Emily, 27F, for about 2 years now. When we first started dating, everything felt perfect. She was fun, spontaneous, and we had such a natural connection. Over time, we learned more about each other's pasts, and things became a bit more complicated. Emily had a pretty serious relationship with her ex, Ben, who she dated for nearly 4 years. According to her, they broke up about a year before we met, and she says it ended on good terms. They're still on decent terms now, or at least that's what she tells me. Ben lives in the city, and they've always stayed in touch as friends. I didn't think too much of it at first, because she had always assured me that they were just friends and that there was no romantic connection left between them. Here's where it starts getting tricky. A few months ago, Emily started talking more about Ben. She mentioned that they'd been catching up more often, just chatting and hanging out occasionally. I didn't think it was a big deal at first. I mean, I trust her, and she's never given me any reason to doubt her. But things started to feel a bit off when she started mentioning their old memories together and how much she misses them. She would talk about their trips, the time they spent together, and how close they were. It started to make me feel uncomfortable, but I didn't want to be the jealous boyfriend, so I kept my mouth shut. Then, about a month ago, Emily told me that she and Ben were planning to meet up for coffee one Saturday afternoon. At first, I wasn't sure how to feel. It was the first time they'd made plans to hang out one-on-one since we started dating. I tried not to let it bother me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I tried to downplay it, telling myself that I trusted her and that there was nothing to worry about. That afternoon, she came home a little later than expected. When I asked how it went, she seemed really happy. She told me they had a great time and ended up talking for hours, reminiscing about the past. She seemed so at ease talking about him, and I felt like I was just standing there as a stranger in the conversation. It didn't sit well with me, and I didn't hide my discomfort. I told her that I didn't feel great about her hanging out with Ben so frequently. I explained that I understood they were friends, but it was making me uncomfortable that she was so close with someone she had dated for years, especially when we were in a committed relationship. I told her that it wasn't about mistrusting her, but more about how I felt emotionally about their connection. I explained that I thought it would be healthier for us if she didn't spend as much time with him, at least for the sake of our relationship. Emily was taken aback. She said she understood where I was coming from, but she didn't think she was doing anything wrong. She told me that she and Ben were just friends now, and she didn't see anything wrong with catching up every once in a while. She was really upset that I didn't trust her to maintain a healthy friendship with him, and she felt like I was being controlling. I tried to explain that it wasn't about controlling her, but about setting boundaries in our relationship to ensure we both felt secure. She wasn't convinced, and the conversation ended with her being really hurt. Over the next few days, things felt tense between us. She started distancing herself, and we weren't communicating as openly as we had before. She kept saying that I was overreacting, and I kept feeling like I was being ignored. I know I might have come on too strong, but it's just that I've always been someone who values emotional intimacy in a relationship, and I didn't like how close she was getting to her ex. It felt like a line was being crossed. A week later, Emily told me that she had made plans to meet up with Ben again, but this time it was going to be with a group of people, her old college friends. She assured me it would be casual and nothing would happen, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I told her I wasn't comfortable with it, but she got really defensive and accused me of being insecure. She said that I was treating her like she couldn't make her own decisions and that I was trying to control who she spent time with. She said I was being unreasonable and that if I couldn't trust her, then maybe we needed to reconsider our relationship. That comment hit me hard. It made me question whether I was being too overbearing or whether I had a valid concern. I don't want to be that guy who tries to control his partner's every move, but I also don't think it's unreasonable to ask for some boundaries in a relationship, especially when it comes to exes. I know there are a lot of people who can maintain friendships with their exes, but I've never been comfortable with it. It feels like there's always that unspoken what if in the background. I don't want to lose Emily, but I also don't want to feel like I'm being constantly disrespected. I've tried to be understanding and give her space to have her own friendships, but I feel like this situation is slowly driving a wedge between us. I'm starting to question whether I'm being too possessive or if my feelings are justified. I really care about her, but I'm struggling with the fact that she seems to think my concerns are invalid. I'm at a crossroads now. Emily keeps saying that she can't live under my control, and that if I don't trust her, then maybe we shouldn't be together. But I'm starting to wonder if I'm just being overly sensitive and if I need to just accept her relationship with Ben. Maybe I'm overthinking things, but this situation doesn't sit right with me, and I don't know how to resolve it. AITA for asking my girlfriend to stop hanging out with her ex? Or am I just being controlling and insecure? AITA for asking my sister to stop letting my ex visit our family home? I, 30M, have a complicated relationship with my ex, Sarah, 29F. We dated for 5 years before breaking up a year ago. We were each other's first love, and it was a very intense relationship, but ultimately, we grew apart. The breakup wasn't easy, and while it wasn't a dramatic split, it definitely left a lot of unresolved emotions. I moved out of the apartment we shared and ended up moving back in with my parents for a bit while I got my life back on track. During the time after the breakup, Sarah and I didn't really have much contact. It was hard, but I thought it was best for both of us to take some space to heal. A few months ago, I started dating someone new, Claire, 32F, and things have been going really well. We're both on the same page about wanting something serious, and we've already talked about moving in together eventually. Now, my sister, Lisa, 27F, and I have always been close. She's one of my best friends, and we've always confided in each other about pretty much everything. I'm also really close with my parents, so I spend a lot of time at home, especially on weekends. However, things started to feel a little off when I went to a family dinner a couple of months ago and noticed that Sarah was there. She's been showing up at family events and even coming over to our house to visit Lisa. At first, I didn't think much of it because, hey, Lisa and Sarah were friends too, but after a couple of times, I started feeling uncomfortable. I never expected Sarah to be a part of my family's gatherings after we broke up. She had always been really close to my parents, and they liked her a lot, but after the breakup, I assumed she'd fade into the background. However, Lisa started inviting her to family events, and before I knew it, Sarah was back in the mix, hanging out with my parents, coming to dinners, and spending time with my sister. I didn't really know how to address it at first. I tried to keep my distance from her, but it felt weird. I'd be sitting at the table at dinner, trying to make conversation, but I couldn't shake the feeling of discomfort whenever Sarah was around. I know it sounds childish, but I felt like she didn't belong there anymore. The dynamic felt off, and it was bringing back memories of our relationship that I wasn't ready to confront. One weekend, I invited Claire to my family's house for dinner, and to my surprise, Sarah was there. I immediately felt this tension in the room. Claire didn't say anything, but I could tell she felt a little awkward too. The entire dinner was weird, and I could tell both Sarah and Claire were trying to be polite, but the situation was uncomfortable. Afterward, Claire told me she was fine with it, but I could tell she was unsettled. At that point, I started feeling frustrated. I didn't want Sarah to be around every time I visited my family. It was like she was always lurking in the background, and I was constantly reminded of her whenever I came over. I don't want to be dramatic, but it felt like my family was ignoring how uncomfortable this was for me. I wasn't asking anyone to hate Sarah, but I didn't think it was appropriate for her to just keep showing up at family events. She wasn't part of the family anymore, and I felt like it was starting to undermine my relationship with Claire. So, a couple of weeks ago, I pulled Lisa aside and explained how I was feeling. I told her that I didn't mind if she and Sarah stayed friends, but I didn't think it was right for Sarah to keep coming to family events and hanging out at the house. I told Lisa that it was making me uncomfortable and that I was trying to move on with my life. I also explained that Claire wasn't thrilled about the situation and that it felt disrespectful to her. I tried to be as calm and reasonable as possible, but I could tell that Lisa didn't take it well. Lisa got upset with me. She said that Sarah had always been part of the family, and she didn't see the big deal about her continuing to be around. She told me that I was being selfish and that I needed to get over my issues with Sarah. Lisa even said that it wasn't fair to ask her to choose between me and Sarah, and that if I couldn't handle Sarah being around, maybe I shouldn't come to family events. That comment really stung. I never expected Lisa to make me feel like I was the one causing the problem. I've always been there for her, and now it felt like she was dismissing my feelings for the sake of keeping the peace with Sarah. I tried to explain that I wasn't asking her to choose, but I felt like I had a right to express my feelings about the situation. It wasn't like I was asking Sarah to never come around again, but I just didn't want her to be at every family event. I also pointed out that it wasn't fair to Claire, who was already having a hard time feeling comfortable in my family dynamic. Lisa and I ended up arguing. She said that I was being unreasonable and that I should just accept that Sarah was going to be a part of the family, whether I liked it or not. She accused me of trying to control the situation and make everyone uncomfortable just because I couldn't move on from the past. That's when I started to feel really torn. I don't want to lose my sister, but I also don't think I'm asking for too much. I don't think it's unreasonable to ask that my ex doesn't continue to be a regular part of my family's life. Since then, I've been feeling like I'm stuck in the middle. I've tried to avoid family gatherings, but I hate the idea of alienating myself from my family just because of this issue. I don't want to cause drama, but I also don't want to keep feeling uncomfortable every time I'm around my family. I'm also worried that if I continue to distance myself, I'll be the one who ends up losing out on family time. It's been a couple of weeks since that conversation, and I haven't spoken to Lisa much. She still invites Sarah to family things, and I don't know if I should just suck it up or continue to stand my ground. I want my family to respect my boundaries, but I also don't want to make things worse between me and Lisa. So, AITA for asking my sister to stop letting my ex come to family events? Or am I just being overly sensitive and selfish in this situation? AITA for refusing to let my parents move in with me after they spent years favoring my brother and leaving me to fend for myself. I am the youngest of two siblings. My older brother, Ryan, has always been my parents' favorite. Growing up, he could do no wrong in their eyes. If he got in trouble at school, they blamed the teachers. If he wrecked his car, they bought him a new one. Meanwhile, I was expected to be the responsible one. If I got a B on a test, I was lectured about how I wasn't trying hard enough. If I wanted something, I had to work for it myself. It wasn't just about school. Ryan got everything handed to him. My parents paid for him to go to an expensive out-of-state college while I had to take out loans and work part-time just to afford community college. They bought him a car when he turned 16, but when I asked for help buying a used one, they told me I needed to learn the value of hard work. When Ryan flunked out of college after 2 years of partying, my parents just shrugged and let him move back home rent-free. Meanwhile, I was working 2 jobs to pay my tuition and bills. After college, I got a stable job and moved into a small apartment. Ryan bounced from job to job, never lasting more than a few months anywhere. He always had an excuse. His boss was unfair, his co-workers were toxic, the job was beneath him. My parents kept bailing him out. They paid his rent, his bills, and even gave him money to invest in some shady business ventures that never went anywhere. When I got engaged, my parents barely acknowledged it. My mom actually complained that I was being selfish for planning a wedding when Ryan was going through a rough time. At the wedding, they spent more time fussing over him than celebrating with me and my wife. They left early because Ryan was feeling overwhelmed and needed their support. Fast forward a few years. I worked hard, saved money, and bought a house. My wife and I built a good life together. Meanwhile, Ryan continued to mooch off my parents. They paid for everything, his rent, his car, even his groceries. They enabled his laziness for years. Then, last year, my parents' financial situation took a hit. My dad had to retire early due to health issues, and my mom had to cut back on work to take care of him. Suddenly, they couldn't afford to support Ryan anymore. But instead of telling him to stand on his own 2 feet, they started asking me for money. At first, it was little things, help with a bill here, some groceries there. I helped when I could, but I wasn't about to bankroll Ryan's lifestyle. Then they dropped the bombshell. They could no longer afford their house and needed to sell it. They asked if they could move in with me. I asked what their plan was for Ryan. They got defensive and said he was still getting back on his feet and that they couldn't just abandon him. I told them I wasn't willing to take them in if they were still planning to support him. They said I was being cruel and that family takes care of each other. I reminded them that they had spent my entire life favoring Ryan, while I had to struggle on my own. I reminded them that when I needed help, they told me to figure out myself. I told them I wasn't going to take them in just so they could continue enabling my brother. Now the entire family is against me. Relatives are calling me selfish, saying that I'm abandoning my parents in their time of need. My parents are heartbroken and keep telling me that they never thought I would turn my back on them. Ryan, of course, is furious because without them, he actually has to fend for himself for the first time in his life. AITA for refusing to let them move in with me? AITA for telling my friend she can't bring her kids to my wedding after she kept disrespecting my boundaries. I, 29F, am getting married to my fiancée, 30M, and it's been one of the most exciting times of my life. We've been together for 5 years and are finally getting to the point where we're ready to tie the knot. The planning has been relatively smooth, with a few hiccups here and there, but there's one person I've been struggling to manage, my longtime friend Amanda, 30F. I met Amanda in college, and we've been close ever since. We've gone through a lot together, and she's been a huge part of my life. However, there's something about Amanda that has started to wear on me recently, and it's become particularly obvious now that I'm planning my wedding. Amanda has 2 young kids, ages 5 and 3. She's a great mom, and I know she loves her children dearly, but the way she's been handling things regarding my wedding has been driving me up the wall. I'll admit, I have always felt like she's a little entitled when it comes to certain things, but now that we're planning our wedding, it's been harder to overlook. A couple of months ago, we sent out our wedding invitations. It's going to be a smaller, more intimate ceremony with around 100 guests. We're having it at a beautiful venue that requires an RSVP. And since space is limited, we specifically noted on the invitation that the event was an adult-only one. This wasn't a decision we made lightly. We love kids, and we totally understand how important family is, but we really wanted the focus of the day to be on us, and we thought it would be better to have it as an adults-only event so that everyone could relax and have a good time. Well, Amanda was one of the first people to respond to our invitation, and she immediately told me that she couldn't come if she couldn't bring her kids. I was taken aback because I thought the invitation was clear about the no kids rule. I politely reminded her of the wording on the invite and explained that we'd made this decision after much thought. I also reminded her that we had a few other guests who had young kids, and that I understood if they couldn't attend because of the childcare issue. Amanda wasn't happy about it. She told me that she had no one to watch her kids, and that she couldn't come without them. I understood her frustration, but still stood by the decision. I said that I really hoped she could come, but I couldn't make an exception for just her. I wanted to keep things fair for all guests, and we had made the rule for a reason. She said she'd think about it, but I could tell she wasn't pleased. A week later, she called me up to discuss it further. She told me she had thought it over and decided that it wasn't fair for me to expect her to come to an event without her kids. She said it was a special day and that she wanted her kids to be there to witness it. I tried to explain again that I had made this decision for a reason and that I wanted the day to be about us as a couple. I said I understood that it was hard for her, but we had limited space and wanted to keep things focused. She didn't seem to be listening, and honestly, I was starting to feel like she was trying to guilt-trip me into changing my mind. She then suggested that we could work something out where she could bring her kids for part of the ceremony and then leave after, but she wouldn't stay for the whole event if that was a problem. I told her I didn't feel comfortable with that arrangement either, because it didn't solve the issue of having an adult-only event, and I didn't want to create awkwardness with other guests who might feel like they should have made exceptions for their kids too. She said I was being unreasonable and not understanding her situation. The conversation ended on a somewhat sour note. After that, I didn't hear from her for a few weeks. I thought maybe things would settle, and she'd realize I wasn't going to budge. However, she surprised me by showing up at my house a few days later with her kids in tow. I was shocked and honestly a little upset. She came in, and the kids started running around the house while we talked. She apologized for the way she'd acted, but then, in the same breath, she said, "I hope you'll still let me bring them to the wedding. I really can't leave them with anyone else." I was starting to get really frustrated. At that point, I told her that I needed her to respect my boundaries. I explained that this wasn't just about her. It was about the vision I had for my wedding day. I told her again that I couldn't make exceptions, and I didn't think it was fair to change the rules for her. I said that if she couldn't attend without her kids, then I understood, but I wasn't willing to alter the wedding plans. Amanda didn't respond well to this. She got upset and said that she felt unimportant and that my wedding was more important to me than our friendship. I didn't want to fight, but it seemed like Amanda just wasn't willing to understand. The situation started escalating when she posted about it on social media. She didn't mention me by name, but it was pretty obvious she was talking about the situation. She posted something along the lines of, "It's so disappointing when your friends don't value your role as a mom and can't accept that you need to have your kids with you." The post gained some attention from mutual friends, and some of them started reaching out to me, asking what had happened. I was hurt, Honestly, I didn't want to air our private disagreement out publicly. I felt like she was manipulating the situation and trying to paint me as the villain. Some of our mutual friends started picking sides, with a few supporting me and a few supporting Amanda. I felt like I was in the middle of a mess, and I just wanted to focus on my wedding, not all this drama. After that post, Amanda and I had another conversation, where she told me she had been talking to her therapist and realized that she was just trying to protect herself and her kids from feeling neglected. I could understand her frustration, but at this point, I was fed up. I told her that I couldn't keep going back and forth about this, and that if she couldn't respect my boundaries, then she shouldn't come to the wedding. I said that I still cared about our friendship, but I needed her to understand that my wedding was important to me, and I needed her to respect my decision. Since then, Amanda hasn't spoken to me much. I've tried to reach out, but she's been distant. She still hasn't RSVP'd to the wedding, and I'm honestly not sure if she's going to come at all. I feel really torn because I value our friendship, but I also feel like she's not respecting me or the boundaries I set. I understand her frustration as a mom, but I don't think it's fair for her to demand that I change my wedding plans to accommodate her kids. I'm still hoping we can patch things up, but I'm really conflicted about whether I did the right thing. I'm not sure if I'm being too rigid or if I'm justified in sticking to my guns. AITA for telling my friend she can't bring her kids to my wedding? Or am I just being too harsh on her? AITA for refusing to give my cousin the inheritance my grandmother left me because my aunt thinks it was meant for her? I come from a family where favoritism runs deep. My grandmother, Nana, was the only person who ever treated me fairly. She always made sure I knew I was loved and supported, which meant a lot because my parents were always more focused on my cousin Lila. Lila is my aunt's daughter, and for some reason, my entire family has always treated her like she was the most important person in the world. My aunt had Lila young, and my grandparents stepped in to help raise her. My parents, especially my mom, took on a second parent role, treating Lila like the daughter she wished she had instead of me. Every holiday, birthday, and special occasion revolved around Lila. If I ever wanted something, I was told I had to understand that Lila had it harder and that I should be grateful for what I had. Lila got everything: ballet lessons, expensive clothes, vacations. Meanwhile, I was told to be independent and work for what I wanted. If I complained, I was called selfish. My parents and my aunt spent thousands on Lila's hobbies and education, while I had to take out loans for college and work part-time to support myself. The one person who never treated me like I was less important was Nana. She made sure I got birthday presents when everyone else forgot. She showed up for my school events when my parents didn't bother. She was the only one who ever told me she was proud of me. When Nana passed away last year, it was devastating. She had been my rock, the only person in my family who made me feel like I mattered. After the funeral, my family barely spoke about her. They were more focused on making sure my aunt and Lila were okay. A few months later, the family was gathered for the reading of Nana's will. My parents, aunt, and Lila all assumed Nana had left everything to my aunt and her family since they had always been the center of her world. What they didn't expect was that Nana left a significant inheritance to me. It wasn't millions, but it was enough to change my life, enough to pay off my student loans and finally get some stability. The rest of Nana's estate was divided among other family members, including my aunt, but it was clear that Nana had intentionally left me this money. My aunt was furious. She immediately started questioning the will, saying that Nana must have been confused when she wrote it. My mom, instead of supporting me, agreed and said there was no way Nana would have done this unless she had been manipulated. My aunt outright said that the money was meant for Lila and that I needed to do the right thing and give it to her. I refused. I told them Nana made her decision and that she must have had her reasons. That's when the real guilt-tripping started. My aunt cried, saying that Lila was struggling and needed the money more than I did. My mom told me I was being selfish, that I should think about family first. My dad, who usually stays out of family drama, told me that keeping the money would ruin my relationship with my family. Lila just sat there, looking sad like she expected me to cave. I didn't. I stood my ground. I told them that for once in my life, someone had chosen me, and I wasn't going to give that up just because it wasn't what they wanted. I reminded them of all the times I had to struggle while they handed everything to Lila. I told them Nana had seen that, and that's why she made the decision she did. That didn't go over well. My aunt screamed at me, calling me ungrateful. My mom said I was breaking the family apart. My dad just sighed and said I needed to think about what Nana would want, as if Nana hadn't made it clear by writing the will the way she did. Since then, my family has completely turned against me. They barely speak to me, and when they do, it's to pressure me into giving the money to Lila. I've had relatives reach out, telling me that family should come first, that Lila is going through a hard time, and that I don't really need the money as much as she does. The thing is, I do need the money. I've spent my whole life working twice as hard to get half as much. This is the first time I've ever been given something without having to fight for it. I don't think I should have to give it up just because my family thinks Lila is more important than me. AITA for refusing to give my cousin the inheritance Nana left me. AITA for refusing to let my brother move in with me after he spent years treating me like I was beneath him. I have an older brother, Jason, who has always looked down on me. Growing up, he was the golden child, smart, athletic, popular. Our parents worshipped the ground he walked on, always bragging about his accomplishments while barely acknowledging mine. If he got an A, they celebrated with a big dinner. If I got an A, they said, "That's what you're supposed to do." Jason made it clear early on that he thought he was better than me. He teased me relentlessly, calling me a nerd, making fun of my hobbies, and acting like anything I was interested in was lame. When I got into gaming, he mocked me for wasting my life. When I took an interest in art, he called it a useless skill. Our parents never stopped him. If I complained, they told me to stop being so sensitive. Jason had everything handed to him. He got a car when he turned 16. I had to save up and buy a used one. Our parents paid for his college tuition in full. I had to take out loans and work part-time. When I graduated, I had debt and no financial safety net. Jason graduated debt-free and walked straight into a high-paying job because of my dad's connections. After college, Jason thrived. He moved to a big city, got an amazing job, and made more money in a year than I did in 5. He married a woman from a wealthy family, bought a house, and acted like he had completely moved past his embarrassing little brother. He never visited, never called unless he needed something, and only spoke to me at family events where he made sure to remind me how much better his life was. Meanwhile, I worked my ass off. I slowly climbed my way up in my career, paid off my debt, and eventually bought a modest home. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and I was proud of it. I built a stable life for myself without any handouts, without any shortcuts. Then last year, Jason's perfect life crumbled. His wife divorced him, and it turned out she had a much better lawyer. She took the house, a good chunk of his savings, and left him scrambling. A few months later, he lost his job. He had been living well beyond his means for years, assuming he would always be making a 6-figure salary, so he had no real savings. He ended up moving back in with my parents. Our parents, of course, bent over backward to make him comfortable. They gave him their guest room, cooked for him, and treated him like a victim of some great injustice. Meanwhile, they started making passive-aggressive comments to me about how family supports each other and how Jason was going through a hard time. I knew where this was going. Sure enough, after a few months, Jason decided that living with our parents was too stifling and that he needed a fresh start. He called me and casually mentioned that he was thinking about moving in with me for a little while. I was stunned. Jason had never once treated me like an equal, never once supported me in any way, and now he expected me to take him in? I told him no. I said I didn't think it would be a good idea. That's when the guilt-tripping started. He said I was being petty, that I needed to grow up and stop holding on to the past. He said he would only stay for a few months and that I wouldn't even notice he was there. I stood firm. I told him I had worked too hard to build a stable life, and I wasn't going to risk it for someone who had never once been there for me. I reminded him of how he treated me growing up, how he always acted like I was beneath him. He scoffed and said that was just brotherly teasing and that I needed to get over it. Then my parents got involved. They called me and said Jason really needed me. They told me it was my duty as his brother to help him. When I reminded them that they never lifted a finger to help me when I was struggling, they got defensive and said that was different. I refused. Now my entire family is furious. My parents say I'm selfish, that Jason is my brother, and that family takes care of each other. Jason is telling everyone that I'm bitter and resentful and that I'm punishing him for things that happened years ago. Even some extended relatives have reached out, telling me I should just let him stay for a while because he's learned his lesson. But has he? He hasn't apologized for how he treated me. He hasn't acknowledged that he had every advantage while I had to struggle. He just expects me to open my home to him because suddenly he needs me. AITA for refusing to let him move in? AITA for refusing to let my sister-in-law live with us after she repeatedly disrespected our boundaries? I, 35M, and my wife, Megan, 34F, have been married for 7 years, and for the most part, we've had a pretty solid relationship. We both have stable jobs, a comfortable home, and 2 kids, ages 5 and 3. Things have been going well for us, but recently, we've had a major issue with my sister-in-law, Emily, 28F, that has completely shaken things up. A bit of background: Emily has always been a bit of a handful. She's the youngest in her family and has a history of making impulsive decisions without considering the consequences. She's had a string of bad relationships, frequently moves between apartments because she can't seem to get along with roommates, and has often relied on our family for financial support. While Megan and I have tried to be understanding and help out when we can, we've always set clear boundaries with her, particularly when it comes to living arrangements. A few months ago, Emily found herself in a tough spot. She had just broken up with her most recent boyfriend and was once again facing eviction because she couldn't pay her rent. She reached out to Megan, asking if she could stay with us temporarily while she got back on her feet. Megan and I discussed it, and after some back and forth, we agreed to let her stay with us for a couple of weeks, with the understanding that it was a temporary arrangement. We set clear boundaries. Emily would need to follow the house rules, pitch in with chores, and, most importantly, respect our family space. We made it clear to her that while we were happy to help, this was not going to be an open-ended offer. We needed her to actively work on getting a job, paying off her bills, and looking for a new place to live. It wasn't that we didn't want to help, but we were not in a position to let her live with us indefinitely. We had our own kids and responsibilities, and while we were empathetic to her situation, we needed to maintain some semblance of order in our household. At first, things seemed to be going okay. Emily seemed appreciative and was making an effort to keep to the rules. She helped out with dinner here and there and kept her space tidy. However, within a week or two, things started to shift. Emily stopped following the rules we had set. She started leaving her things all over the house, particularly in the common areas, and would often leave dirty dishes in the sink for days. I noticed that she wasn't making much of an effort to look for a job or even contribute to the household in any significant way. At the same time, Emily started bringing people over without asking. The first time it happened, Megan and I were at work, and Emily had a couple of friends over who were clearly drinking and being loud. Our kids were home, and the noise and chaos made it hard for them to nap. When we got home, Megan confronted Emily about it, and she apologized, saying she didn't realize it was a big deal. We reiterated that we didn't want random guests in our home, especially when we weren't there to supervise. Emily promised it wouldn't happen again, but, of course it did. A few days later, Emily had another group of friends over. This time they were smoking in the backyard and the smell started coming into the house. It was a violation of our no-smoking rule, and when I confronted Emily about it, she seemed dismissive. She told me that she was an adult and shouldn't have to follow my house rules, especially if I wasn't home. I was livid, but I tried to keep calm. I reminded her that she was staying in our home out of courtesy, and the least she could do was respect our boundaries. I also told her that if she couldn't follow the rules, she would need to find another place to stay. At this point, I was really starting to get frustrated. Emily was not taking our concerns seriously. She was treating our home like a free pass to do whatever she wanted, and every time we asked her to follow a rule, she'd either ignore it or get defensive. Megan and I were both on edge, and our kids were getting affected by the tension in the house. It wasn't an environment we wanted to raise them in, and we felt like our generosity was being taken for granted. The final straw came about a month ago. I came home early from work one day to find Emily's boyfriend, who we had never met, sitting on our couch. He had his shoes on the furniture, and there were empty beer cans on the coffee table. I was furious. I immediately asked Emily why she hadn't mentioned him or asked if it was okay for him to be there. She seemed completely unfazed and said, "It's just for a few hours, relax." I told her that this was the last straw and that she needed to either start respecting our space and rules or leave. She said she didn't have anywhere else to go, and I could tell that she was getting upset, but I stuck to my guns. I wasn't going to let her walk all over us anymore. Megan and I discussed the situation privately that night, and we both agreed that it was time to tell Emily that her time was up. We had been more than patient, but it had been over a month, and she wasn't taking any responsibility for her actions or showing any effort to improve her situation. The next day, we sat down with Emily and told her that we could no longer allow her to stay with us. We explained that while we understood she was going through a tough time, we couldn't keep enabling her behavior. She needed to either respect our home or find somewhere else to stay. Emily didn't take the news well. She immediately became defensive and started accusing us of being unsupportive. She said we had promised to help her, but we were kicking her out when she needed us the most. She said that we were being selfish and that we didn't care about her. She also started making comments about how we were lucky we had a stable family and that we didn't understand what it was like to be on our own. The guilt tripping was overwhelming, and it made me second-guess whether we were doing the right thing. But deep down, I knew we had no choice. Eventually, Emily packed up her things and left. She found a place to stay with a friend, but the fallout has been far from over. Emily has been posting passive-aggressive comments on social media about us, calling us fake family and accusing us of abandoning her. Some of her friends have reached out to us, trying to get us to see reason and let Emily back into our home. But Megan and I are firm in our decision. We've been nothing but supportive, and we've given Emily chance after chance. But she continuously took advantage of our kindness. Now, the rest of the family is getting involved. Our parents have called us asking why we kicked Emily out, and some of my extended family members have started giving us the cold shoulder. They think we should have been more understanding and patient with her, especially since she's going through a tough time. Megan and I are both starting to feel the pressure from them, and we're beginning to question if we made the right choice. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister-in-law live with us after she repeatedly disrespected our boundaries? Or are we in the wrong for not being more patient with her situation? AITA for refusing to give my sister my wedding dress after she demanded it? I, 30F, recently got married to my husband, Jason, 32M, after being together for 5 years. We've always been very close with both of our families, and they were very supportive throughout the wedding process. We had a beautiful, intimate ceremony with only close friends and family in attendance. It was everything I had ever dreamed of, and the day went perfectly. I was so happy with how everything turned out, and the best part was, of course, the wedding dress. My dress was something I had envisioned for a long time. I'd started shopping for years before I even met Jason, so when the time came, I already had a clear idea of what I wanted. It was a classic style, a lace ball gown with intricate detailing on the bodice, and a long train. I spent a lot of time and effort picking out the right one, and I felt absolutely stunning in it. I had it professionally cleaned and stored afterward, and I've kept it in a protective garment bag, still in perfect condition. My sister, Abby, 27F, has always been someone I've been close with, though we've had our moments of tension. She's always been a little more high maintenance, and she's often gotten herself into situations where she needs a lot of support from the family, but we've always been there for her. She has a similar taste and style to me, and she's often admired my clothes, my possessions, and my lifestyle. But there's always been a fine line, one that I've tried to respect, that I don't just give her everything she wants. She's constantly asking to borrow things, but I've been firm in saying no when it comes to things that are sentimental or that I've worked hard to obtain. About 2 weeks ago, Abby called me out of the blue. She said she wanted to talk about something important and asked if I'd be available. We had a chat on the phone, and she got straight to the point. She was getting married, and she wanted to wear my wedding dress. At first, I thought she was joking. We've always joked about the idea of borrowing clothes or accessories, but this was different. She wasn't asking to borrow a handbag or shoes. She was asking to wear my wedding dress. I asked her to clarify, and she said she was serious. She loved my dress and thought it was perfect for her upcoming wedding, which was happening in 6 months. She told me that it was the only dress she had in mind, and that she couldn't find anything else she liked as much. I was stunned. The first thing I said was that my dress was very special to me, and I wasn't comfortable with the idea of her wearing it. I explained that I had put a lot of thought into choosing it, and it was a keepsake I planned to cherish for the rest of my life. I told her that it was important to me and that I didn't want to lend it out. She didn't take it well. She immediately became defensive and started saying that I was being selfish. She argued that since we're sisters, we should share things, and she said I should be happy that she wanted to wear my dress because it would bring the family closer together. She insisted that this was a special request, and that I would be a terrible sister if I didn't help her out. She even went as far as to say that I was hoarding the dress and that it wasn't really mine to keep in the first place. She said it was just a dress and that I could always buy a new one if I really wanted to, but she didn't have the money to buy something as expensive. I was taken aback by her reaction, especially when she started accusing me of being materialistic and self-centered. This was my wedding dress we were talking about, something that represented one of the happiest moments of my life. It wasn't just a piece of clothing to me. It had sentimental value that I wasn't willing to give up for the sake of her wedding day. I tried to explain this to her calmly, but she wasn't having it. She started sending me text messages and calling me nonstop, repeating how disappointed she was in me for not sharing. I asked my husband, Jason, what he thought about the situation, and he agreed that I had every right to keep the dress and not lend it to Abby. He said that it was my choice and that no one should pressure me into doing something I wasn't comfortable with. Still, I couldn't help but feel guilty, especially since Abby had been so insistent. A few days later, I tried to have another conversation with Abby. I told her that I loved her and wanted to support her, but that my wedding dress was not something I could lend out. I offered to help her look for a dress or even go shopping with her to find something that suited her. I told her I would be more than happy to help her find a beautiful dress of her own, but the one I wore on my wedding day was not something I could share. At this point, Abby got even angrier. She accused me of ruining her wedding by being so difficult and said that I was making it all about me. She said I was being petty and that she had no idea why I was making such a big deal out of something so trivial. She said, "It's just a dress, but you're acting like it's the only thing that matters." She even said that I had enough money to buy a new dress, so why couldn't I just let her have this one? She started making passive-aggressive comments about me being spoiled and not caring about family. I tried to stay calm, but the situation was really starting to wear on me. I had tried to be patient, understanding, and kind, but it felt like no matter what I said, she wasn't hearing me. She started telling our family that I was refusing to help her and that I was being unsupportive. She even accused me of holding the dress hostage and said that I was being a bad sister. Eventually, the whole thing got so heated that we stopped talking for a few days. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, and felt like I was being pushed into a corner. I knew it wasn't just about the dress anymore. It was about respect, boundaries, and how much I was willing to sacrifice for the sake of avoiding conflict. I still couldn't bring myself to give her the dress, and I was firm in my decision. Then, our mother got involved. She called me and said she was disappointed in my refusal to lend Abby the dress. She said that I was being unreasonable and mean-spirited for not sharing it with my sister. She argued that family is supposed to support each other, and that this was just a small gesture that would have meant the world to Abby. My mother said that Abby was hurt, and I needed to be more understanding. I told her that I had been understanding for weeks, but that this wasn't just about being generous. It was about boundaries, and I wasn't willing to cross them. The situation escalated, and Abby eventually sent me a message saying she didn't want to speak to me until I apologized for being so selfish. She said she would never ask me for anything again, and that our relationship was forever changed because of this. I felt heartbroken, but I also felt like I had made the right choice. Now my family is divided. Some are on my side, saying that it's my dress, and I shouldn't be pressured into lending it out if I'm not comfortable. Others think I'm being unreasonable and that I should have made a sacrifice for my sister's happiness. I feel torn, but at the end of the day, I know I can't compromise my boundaries just to avoid conflict. So, AITA for refusing to give my sister my wedding dress after she demanded it? Or am I being too possessive over something that's ultimately just a piece of clothing? AITA for refusing to let my parents move in after they sold my childhood home to fund my sister's lavish lifestyle? I have an older sister, Melissa, who has always been the favorite. Growing up, she was treated like a princess while I was expected to be independent. She got dance lessons, music lessons, designer clothes, and expensive vacations. I got whatever was left over. When she wanted a car at 16, my parents bought her a brand new one. When I turned 16, I was told to get a job and start saving if I wanted a car. It wasn't just material things. My parents were emotionally invested in Melissa's life in a way they never were with me. They went to every recital, every competition, every school event she had. Meanwhile, if I had a game or a school project, they suddenly had other commitments. It became clear early on that I was an afterthought. After high school, Melissa went to an expensive private university, fully funded by my parents. I was expected to take out loans and work part-time to pay for community college. When I asked why they wouldn't help me the way they helped Melissa, they told me she had bigger dreams and needed their support more. Melissa never had to struggle. After college, she bounced from job to job, quitting whenever she got bored. My parents always covered her bills, paid her rent, and even helped fund her shopping habits. Meanwhile, I was working 2 jobs just to stay afloat. Eventually, I got a stable career, worked my way up, and bought a modest home. I wasn't rich, but I was financially comfortable. Melissa, on the other hand, continued to burn through money like it was nothing. She racked up credit card debt, went on extravagant vacations, and lived way beyond her means. Every time she got in financial trouble, my parents bailed her out. Then, a few years ago, they made a shocking decision. They sold my childhood home, the only real asset they had, and gave almost all of the money to Melissa. They paid off her debts, bought her a new car, and even helped her put a down payment on a house. When I asked why they didn't save any of the money for their own future, or, at the very least, split it between us, they said Melissa needed it more. I was stunned. That house had been in our family for generations, and they just threw it all away to enable Melissa's reckless lifestyle. They reassured me that they didn't need the money because they had retirement savings, so I let it go. I stopped expecting anything from them and focused on my own life. Fast forward to last year. My parents' financial situation took a turn. It turned out their retirement savings weren't as secure as they thought. Medical bills, bad investments, and years of supporting Melissa had drained them. Suddenly, they were struggling. And then came the request. They wanted to move in with me. They said they couldn't afford their rent anymore and needed a place to stay. I asked about Melissa. Surely, since she had received the majority of their financial support, she would take them in. But no. Melissa had just gotten married to a well-off guy and didn't want them cramping her style. She told them she couldn't possibly have them move in because it would put stress on her new marriage. So now, they were looking to me, the child they had neglected, overlooked, and refused to help. The child they had told to figure things out on their own. The child they had essentially told wasn't as important. I said no. I told them I wasn't in a position to take them in, that I had built my life independently, and I wasn't about to throw it away for people who had never been there for me. They begged, saying they had nowhere else to go. I asked them what happened to all the money from selling the house. They got quiet. Then they admitted that it was gone. All of it had gone to Melissa. I told them that wasn't my problem, that they had made their choices, and now they had to deal with the consequences. They called me ungrateful, saying that family takes care of each other. I reminded them that they had never taken care of me, that when I needed help, they told me to figure it out myself. Now, the entire family is furious with me. Relatives are calling, saying I'm cruel for letting my parents struggle when I have a home they could stay in. Melissa, of course, is acting like she's the victim, saying she wishes she could help, but just can't. AITA for refusing to let them move in? AITA for refusing to take in my sister and her kids after she burned every bridge in the family? I have an older sister, Emily, who has always been the kind of person who believes the world owes her something. Growing up, she was spoiled, entitled, and used to getting her way. My parents catered to her every demand, while I was expected to be the responsible one. If she threw a tantrum, they gave in. If I ever pushed back against unfair treatment, I was told to be the bigger person because Emily had a harder time regulating her emotions. That dynamic carried into adulthood. Emily got everything handed to her, college paid for, a new car, rent money when she needed it. Meanwhile, I was told I had to be independent. I worked through college, bought my own used car, and paid my way through life while Emily bounced from one job to another, never lasting more than a few months anywhere. She always had an excuse. The boss was too demanding, the coworkers were toxic, the hours were unfair. My parents always took her side, saying she was just trying to find the right fit. Then she met her now ex-husband, Mark. From the beginning, everyone in the family knew it was a disaster waiting to happen. Mark was just as entitled as Emily, if not worse. He never kept a job for long, was constantly involved in shady business deals, and had a temper. But Emily was convinced they were soulmates. They got married after a whirlwind romance and quickly had 2 kids. My parents continued to support them financially because, shocker, neither Emily nor Mark could keep a steady income. Over the years, Emily burned through every bit of goodwill she had with the family. She borrowed money from relatives and never paid it back. She guilt-tripped our parents into paying their rent multiple times, even when it meant my parents had to dip into their retirement savings. She used my younger cousin as an unpaid babysitter so often that the girl eventually cut off all contact. Every family gathering turned into a drama fest about Emily's latest financial crisis, always followed by a plea for help. Mark eventually cheated on Emily and left. She was devastated, but honestly, no one was surprised. Now she was a single mom with no job, no savings, and nowhere to turn. My parents had already spent most of their savings on helping her over the years and couldn't afford to take her in. Our other relatives were either done with her or didn't have the space. And that's when she came to me. Emily called me in tears, saying she had nowhere to go and needed a place to stay with her kids, just for a little while. I own my own home, something I worked years to afford, and I have a stable job. Compared to the rest of my family, I'm doing well. But that's because I worked my ass off, made smart choices, and didn't rely on handouts. I told her no. I knew exactly what would happen if I let her move in. Just for a little while would turn into months, then years. She would contribute nothing, expect me to cover all expenses, and bring endless drama into my life. Her kids, who I do feel bad for, are poorly behaved because she never disciplined them. I had no doubt that if I let them in, my house would become chaotic, my privacy would disappear, and I'd be stuck playing the role of a second parent while Emily did nothing to improve her situation. She lost it. She called me heartless, saying that as her sibling, it was my duty to help her in her time of need. She said her kids were innocent and didn't deserve to be homeless just because of her mistakes. I told her that I wasn't responsible for cleaning up the mess she made of her life. She screamed that I was abandoning my family and hung up. Since then, my parents and some extended family members have been begging me to reconsider. They keep saying that family is everything and that Emily just needs a little support to get back on her feet. I asked them where this support was when I needed it. Where was Emily when I was struggling to pay rent after college? Where was the family when I was eating ramen every night trying to make ends meet? They had no answer for that. The guilt tripping is relentless. My parents are saying they're so disappointed in me. Some relatives are calling me selfish. But I refuse to set myself on fire to keep Emily warm. She has burned every bridge, used every resource, and taken advantage of everyone who has ever tried to help her. I know that if I let her in, she will never leave. AITA for refusing to let her move in. AITA for refusing to pay for my parents' retirement after they spent my entire childhood blowing money on my golden child brother. I grew up in a household where my older brother, Jake, was treated like royalty while I was an afterthought. My parents adored him. He was the star athlete, the charismatic one, the son they bragged about at every family gathering. Meanwhile, I was the quiet kid who got good grades but was mostly ignored. If Jake wanted something, he got it, no questions asked. If I needed something, I was met with, "We can't afford that," or "You don't really need it, do you?" It wasn't just about material things. My parents invested in Jake's future in every possible way. They paid for his expensive sports camps, his brand new car at 16, his private college tuition, and even helped him buy his first home in his mid-20s. Meanwhile, I was told to get a part-time job if I wanted spending money. When I turned 16, I was expected to borrow my dad's old car, which barely ran. And when I went to college, I took out loans and worked 2 jobs to make ends meet. I spent years thinking maybe I was just overreacting, that maybe all families had a favorite and I just had to accept it. But then things started getting really clear when I graduated from college. While I was drowning in student debt, my parents threw Jake an extravagant wedding. I mean, they paid for everything: the venue, the catering, even the honeymoon. When I got engaged a few years later, I didn't expect them to cover anything, but I thought maybe they'd at least contribute a little. Instead, they told me, "You're responsible enough to handle it on your own." That was the moment I emotionally checked out. I stopped trying to win their approval and focused on my own life. I worked hard, built my career, and eventually became financially stable. I bought my own house, paid off my student loans, and was in a good place. I barely spoke to my parents except for the occasional holiday visit, and I had little to no contact with Jake, who had continued to mooch off them well into his 30s. Then a few months ago, I got a call from my parents. They were struggling financially and needed help. Apparently, years of funding Jake's lifestyle had caught up with them. They had no savings, their house was falling apart, and they were in serious debt. They said they were too old to work full-time and needed me to step up as their son and help them out financially. I asked about Jake. Surely, since he had been the recipient of their endless generosity, he would be the one to help, right? No. Jake, despite getting every possible advantage in life, was still financially unstable. He had made bad investments, jumped from job to job, and was now living paycheck to paycheck. He had nothing to offer them. So now, they were looking at me, the kid they had neglected, the one they had never helped, the one they had always expected to fend for himself. I told them no. I reminded them how they had spent their entire lives prioritizing Jake over me, how they had told me over and over that I was independent and responsible enough to take care of myself. I said that if they wanted help, they should turn to the son they spent decades supporting. They were furious. They accused me of being cold, of abandoning them in their time of need. They said parents always take care of their children, and now it was my turn to return the favor. I told them that they had already chosen which child to invest in, and they made it clear for years that it wasn't me. Now, the entire family is involved. Relatives are calling me selfish, saying that family takes care of each other and that I'll owe my parents for raising me. Jake, of course, has conveniently stayed silent through all of this. My parents are struggling, and I know that financially I could help them, but I don't want to. AITA for refusing to bail them out after everything they did. AITA for not helping my sister with her wedding planning after she made a rude comment about my lifestyle. I, 29F, have a sister, Rachel, 31F, who's been very important to me throughout my life. We've always had a fairly close relationship, but as we've gotten older, things have become a little more complicated. Our relationship has been tested over the years for various reasons, but we've always managed to work things out. That is, until recently, and I feel like I might have finally hit a breaking point with her. Rachel and her fiancé, Tom, 34M, got engaged about 6 months ago, and since then, she's been completely consumed by wedding planning. I've been very supportive from the beginning, helping with venue suggestions, vendor recommendations, and generally just being there when she needed to vent about the stress of planning a wedding. I knew this was a huge deal for her, and I wanted to be a good sister, so I was doing everything I could to help. Now, I need to give a little background about my own life situation. I'm single, and I don't have kids. I've always been a little more focused on my career, hobbies, and traveling. I've been independent for a long time, and I'm really happy with where I am in life. However, I know my lifestyle isn't the norm for everyone, and I've come to accept that some people, especially my family, don't quite understand it. A couple of months ago, I was helping Rachel with wedding planning when she dropped a comment that really stuck with me. We were sitting in a cafe, sipping coffee, and she was going on about the number of guests she wanted to invite and how expensive everything was. I was nodding and listening, offering suggestions here and there, when she suddenly said, I've just been thinking about everything and how we have to budget and stuff, and I just don't get why you don't want to settle down, have kids, and do something more normal with your life. I mean, it's like you've chosen to be alone and selfish. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. I tried to keep it together, but inside, I was taken aback. First of all, I wasn't asking for her opinion on my personal choices. Secondly, It felt incredibly hurtful for her to call my life selfish just because I hadn't followed the same traditional path she had. I don't think I'm selfish at all. I'm choosing to live the life that makes me happy, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But hearing her say that in such a dismissive way felt like a slap in the face. I took a deep breath and said, "Rachel, that's a pretty hurtful thing to say. Just because I don't want the same things you do doesn't make me selfish. I've made choices that work for me, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that." She brushed it off, saying, "I didn't mean it like that. It's just that we're all growing up, and it seems like you're stuck in some kind of phase." I didn't really know how to respond to that, so I just let it go, but it lingered with me for weeks. The comment kept popping into my head, and I started feeling increasingly uncomfortable around her. It wasn't like we didn't have different lifestyles, but I never felt judged by her before. I just couldn't shake the feeling that she was looking down on my life choices. Then a few weeks ago, Rachel asked me for help with a specific part of the wedding planning. She wanted me to help her pick out some bridesmaid dresses for her wedding party, which I agreed to do. We went to a store together, and I thought we were having a good time trying on dresses and looking at different styles. But then she dropped another bombshell. Out of nowhere, she said, I just don't get why you can't get it together like I have. I mean, you've always been kind of flaky about relationships and settling down. Maybe if you spent less time on your hobbies and more time thinking about your future, you'd actually be in a real relationship." This hit me hard. First of all, the timing was terrible. I was already feeling hurt by her earlier comment, and now it felt like she was insulting my entire lifestyle. I don't think I'm flaky. I've had relationships, but they didn't work out. I don't regret being single, and I'm not in any rush to change that. But for Rachel to imply that I'm doing something wrong, or that I'm somehow less than her just because I'm not married or have kids, that stung. I told her that I wasn't going to sit there and listen to her criticize my personal life anymore. I said that I've been doing my best to be supportive of her wedding planning, but I wasn't going to continue to help her if she was going to be so rude about my choices. She got defensive and said, "I'm just trying to help you realize what's important in life." I told her that I didn't need her to tell me what's important in my life, and that I was more than capable of making my own decisions. I didn't hear from her for a few days, but then she reached out with a text message that felt like an ultimatum. She said, "Look, I know I've been hard on you lately, but I really need you to step up for my wedding. I've been counting on you to help with a lot of things, and I feel like you've been distant. You can either support me through this or stay on the sidelines." The thing is, I was already feeling like I was being pushed away from her wedding in more ways than one. Every time I tried to help, it felt like I was getting a cold shoulder or being made to feel like my own life choices were somehow wrong. It was exhausting. I want to be there for her, but I also don't want to be treated like I'm inferior just because I don't have the same life she does. After some serious thought, I made the decision not to help her with any more wedding planning. I sent her a message explaining that I didn't appreciate the way she was treating me and that I needed some space from the wedding planning. I told her I would still attend the wedding and celebrate with her, but I wasn't going to continue to put myself in a position where I felt unappreciated or judged. She was livid. She accused me of being unsupportive and said that I was making everything about me when it should be about her big day. She even said I was being jealous of her wedding and that I was trying to make her feel guilty for getting married. That was a low blow, and it really hurt because it was completely untrue. I wasn't jealous. I just didn't want to feel like I was being belittled or controlled. Now, things are tense between us. I'm still planning on attending the wedding, but I'm not sure how things are going to play out. I feel like I've been as supportive as I can, but I'm starting to question whether I should have just put up with her behavior for the sake of peace. So, am I the asshole for not helping my sister with her wedding after she made rude comments about my lifestyle? Should I have let it go and continued to support her? Or am I justified in stepping back? AITA for refusing to babysit my niece after my sister accused me of being selfish for wanting to travel. I, 30F, have an older sister, Amy, 34F, who is married with 2 kids. I love my niece and nephew, and we've always had a close relationship. However, things between Amy and me have been strained lately due to a situation involving babysitting and a planned trip of mine. To give some background, I've always been someone who values travel and experiencing new places. I've worked hard in my career, and I've always made it a point to save money for trips that I've been dreaming about. My fiancé, Mark, 32M, and I love to travel, and we've been planning a big trip to Europe for months now. We've both been looking forward to it, especially because it's the first time we're going to be able to travel internationally since the pandemic started. The trip is supposed to be for 2 weeks, and we've already booked everything: flights, hotels, tours, and the like. We made sure to arrange everything well in advance to make sure we didn't have to worry about last-minute bookings. We're really excited, and we've been talking about it nonstop. Now, my sister Amy knows about our trip and has known for months. She's been supportive of it and has even joked around about how lucky we are to be going on such an amazing vacation. However, a few weeks ago, she came to me with a favor. She asked if I would be willing to babysit her 2 kids, Olivia, 7, and Jack, 5, while she and her husband, Tom, went on a weekend trip to visit some friends out of town. At first, I didn't think much of it and agreed to help her out. I've always been happy to spend time with my niece and nephew. But then Amy dropped a bombshell. She told me that her trip was going to coincide with the dates of our Europe trip, and she expected me to stay home to babysit her kids while they were away. I was shocked and didn't know how to respond. She had known about our trip for months, and now she was asking me to give it up to take care of her children. I told her that I couldn't cancel our trip. I explained that it was something Mark and I had been planning for a long time, and it was really important to both of us. I told her that I'd be happy to help out with babysitting any other time, but I just couldn't give up this trip for her. Amy didn't take it well. She said, "I can't believe you're choosing a vacation over family. This is your niece and nephew we're talking about. You can't even sacrifice 2 weeks to help me out." She sounded really hurt, and I felt bad, but at the same time, I was upset that she would ask me to give up my trip for her kids when I had already planned this long in advance. I tried to explain to her that it wasn't about me not wanting to help. I love spending time with her kids, and I know how important it is for her to have a break every once in a while. But I also told her that I've been looking forward to this trip for months, and it was really important to both me and Mark. I also mentioned that I had already made non-refundable bookings and couldn't just back out at the last minute. Amy's response was not understanding at all. She said, "I'm not asking you to cancel your whole trip. I just need you to stay home and help me for a weekend. What's the big deal? You don't even have kids. It's not like you understand what it's like to need help with them." I was taken aback by that last part. I understand that being a parent is hard work, and I do sympathize with her. But the way she phrased it made me feel like she was dismissing my own feelings and priorities just because I don't have children. It felt like she was saying that my life didn't matter as much as hers did. I tried to stay calm and explain that I wasn't trying to dismiss her needs, but I also had plans and obligations. I reminded her that I had been planning this trip for months and had already made arrangements. I told her I would be happy to help out in the future, but I simply couldn't cancel my trip for her. Her response was hurtful. She said, "I don't get you. You're so selfish. You can't even put family first for once? This is exactly why you're always alone. You're too focused on yourself and your own life to ever think about anyone else." That really stung. I tried to hold back tears, but I felt like she was completely attacking me. It felt like she was saying that my life choices, my love for travel, my career focus, my independence were wrong, and that I should have sacrificed all of that to take care of her kids. It hurt that she would call me selfish for choosing my own happiness and plans. I told her that I didn't appreciate the way she was talking to me, and that I didn't deserve to be called selfish for wanting to go on my trip. I said that I had been there for her and helped out in the past, but I couldn't give up my dream trip for her weekend getaway. After that, things got really tense between us. Amy continued to call me selfish, and I told her that I wasn't going to argue with her anymore. I just couldn't understand why she was demanding that I cancel something that was so important to me. The next day, she sent me a text saying that she couldn't believe I was choosing a stupid vacation over family, and that it was really disappointing to her. She said she was struggling with everything and needed someone she could rely on, and that I had let her down. I felt guilty, but I also felt like she was manipulating me into feeling bad for wanting to do something for myself. I didn't respond to the text immediately. I needed some time to process everything. Eventually, I decided to stand firm and told her that I understood she was upset, but I couldn't back out of my trip. I told her that I loved her and her kids, but I also had to take care of myself and my own plans. I offered to help her find a babysitter or a friend who could step in, but I couldn't cancel my trip. That was the last I heard from her for a while. Amy has been distant since then, and I'm not sure how to fix things. I feel like I've been nothing but supportive of her in the past, and I've helped her with her kids when she's needed it. But this time, it just felt like she was being unreasonable. I don't want to lose my relationship with my sister over this, but I also don't think I should have to sacrifice my own happiness for her. I'm starting to question if I made the right choice. Am I the asshole for refusing to cancel my trip and babysit my niece and nephew while she's away? Should I have put family first? Or is she being unreasonable in expecting me to give up my plans? AITA for refusing to let my estranged parents move in with me after they disowned me years ago. I never thought I'd be in this situation. If you had asked me 10 years ago whether I'd ever have to deal with my parents again, I would have said no. But life has a way of throwing unexpected things at you, and now I'm being told I'm heartless for refusing to take them in. For context, I grew up in a very strict religious household. My parents, especially my father, had very rigid ideas about how life should be lived, and any deviation from that was seen as a betrayal. I was raised with the expectation that I would follow their beliefs, marry someone they approved of, and live a life that aligned with their values. The problem? I never fit into their mold. From a young age, I was different. I questioned things they told me to accept blindly. I wanted to pursue a career in a field they didn't approve of. But the real breaking point came when I was 20. I came out as bisexual. I knew it wouldn't go well. I had seen how they talked about other people in the LGBTQ+ community, how they treated family members who strayed from their beliefs. But a part of me hoped that, because I was their child, it would be different. That they would at least try to love me for who I was. I was wrong. They disowned me almost immediately. My father called me disgusting. My mother cried and said she wished she had never given birth to me. They told me I was no longer welcome in their house, and that, as far as they were concerned, I was no longer their child. I was completely cut off financially, emotionally, and in every way that mattered. At the time, I was in college. I had been relying on them for tuition and housing, and suddenly, I had nothing. I had to drop out temporarily, couch surf, and work multiple jobs just to survive. It was one of the hardest times of my life, but I made it through. I built my life from scratch. I went back to school on scholarships and loans. I worked my way up in my field, and after years of struggling, I finally found stability. I have a good job, a house, and a life that I'm proud of. I created my own support system, built my own family with friends who love and accept me. I thought I had left my past behind me. But a few months ago, out of nowhere, I got a call from a relative I hadn't spoken to in years. They told me that my parents had fallen on hard times. My father had lost his job, my mother's health was declining, and they were struggling financially. They had lost their house and had nowhere to go. And now they wanted to move in with me. I was stunned. These were the same people who had thrown me out without a second thought. The same people who had called me an abomination, who had abandoned me when I needed them most. And now they expected me to open my home to them? I told my relative no. They tried to guilt trip me. They said that my parents had made mistakes, but that they were still my family. That family takes care of each other. That, despite everything, I should be the bigger person. I stood firm. I told them that my parents had made their choice years ago. They chose to cut me out of their lives, to abandon me when I was vulnerable. They had made it clear that I wasn't their child anymore. So why should I act like they were my parents now? Since then, the backlash has been relentless. Other relatives have reached out, some begging, some demanding that I reconsider. I've been called cruel, ungrateful, even vengeful. They say that my parents are old and sick and that I have the means to help them. So why wouldn't I? But where were these people when I was struggling? Where was this family support when I was homeless, when I had nothing? Not one of them reached out to help me back then. But now that my parents need something, suddenly I'm the bad guy for not stepping up? I feel conflicted. A part of me wonders if I'm being too harsh. They are struggling, and I do have the ability to help. But another part of me remembers all the nights I cried myself to sleep, all the times I wished they would just love me for who I was. I don't think I owe them anything, but the guilt is eating at me. AITA for refusing to let them move in? AITA for telling my sister she can't bring her dog to my house after she got upset I don't like animals? I, 28F, have a sister, Maya, 31F, who I've always been relatively close with, but we've had our fair share of differences over the years. She's been a bit more outgoing and adventurous, while I'm more of an introvert who enjoys quiet time at home. We've never had major issues, but recently, things have gotten a bit more complicated when it comes to her dog, and I'm really torn about whether or not I handled the situation correctly. Maya has a dog, Bella, a 2-year-old golden retriever that she adopted a few years ago. I've always been a bit uneasy around animals, especially dogs. I don't hate them, but I just don't enjoy having them around. It's not because of any traumatic experience or anything like that. I just prefer not to have pets in my living space. I think animals can be lovely, and I have no problem with people who love their pets. But for me personally, it's just not something I want in my life. This has never been a huge issue before. Maya knows that I don't love dogs, and while she's always been understanding, I've also made sure to avoid putting myself in situations where I'd have to be around her dog for extended periods. Whenever we hang out, we typically meet up at restaurants, parks, or other public places where her dog isn't an issue. But recently, the issue came to a head when Maya asked if she could bring Bella to my house for a weekend visit. I live in a small apartment, and I've always been particular about how I keep my space. I don't want pet hair everywhere, and I don't feel comfortable having a dog running around in my living room, especially when it's just not something I'm used to. When Maya asked me if Bella could come visit for the weekend, I was immediately uncomfortable. I knew saying yes would mean dealing with a dog in my space for several days, and I really didn't want that. I tried to politely explain my feelings to Maya, saying that while I understand she loves Bella, I just don't feel comfortable having her in my home. I told her that I'm not a big fan of dogs being around in general, and that it would be a bit overwhelming for me. I even offered to meet up with her and Bella at a park or for a walk, where we could hang out without the dog being in my home. I thought that would be a reasonable compromise, but Maya wasn't happy with my response. She immediately became defensive and said, "I don't understand why you're being like this. Bella is part of my family, and I can't believe you're treating her like she's some sort of inconvenience. I thought you'd be more understanding since you know how much she means to me." I felt bad because I do know how much Maya loves her dog, but I also felt that my boundaries were being ignored. I explained that I wasn't saying she couldn't see Bella or spend time with her. I was just saying I didn't want her in my apartment. I reiterated that I was happy to see her and Bella outside of my home, but having a dog running around where I live just wasn't something I could handle. She wasn't hearing any of it. Maya got really upset and started saying things like, "You're acting like I'm asking you to give up your life for her. It's just a weekend. It's not that big of a deal." She kept insisting that I was being unreasonable and that I should just get over my discomfort for a weekend. I felt like she wasn't respecting my space or my feelings, but I tried to stay calm and just said, "It's not about getting over it. It's about me being honest with you about what I'm comfortable with. If that means we can't hang out at my place with Bella, then that's just how it is." Maya didn't take kindly to that. She told me that it felt like I was choosing my own weird aversion to dogs over family, and that I was being selfish. She said it was so typical of me to prioritize my own comfort over what would make her happy. I tried to explain that it wasn't about making her unhappy, but more about me respecting my own personal space. I didn't want to make it a bigger issue than it already was, so I tried to end the conversation on a neutral note, saying that I still loved her and understood her love for Bella, but that I couldn't compromise on this. The conversation didn't end there, though. Later that day, Maya sent me a text saying that she was really hurt by my refusal and that I was making her feel like her dog wasn't welcome in my life. She said, "If you can't accept Bella, then you're really not accepting all of me. It's just a dog, not the end of the world." That text really threw me off, and I wasn't sure how to respond. I never meant to hurt her feelings, and I didn't want her to feel like I was rejecting a part of her life. But I also felt that my boundaries were being dismissed. I took a while to process everything and ended up responding with something along the lines of, "I'm sorry that you feel hurt, but I'm not rejecting Bella. I'm just not comfortable having her in my apartment. I hope you can understand that this is more about me respecting my own needs and boundaries. I still love you and Bella, but this is how I feel." Maya didn't reply for a couple of days, and when she did, it was clear she was still upset. She said she was disappointed in me and that she was starting to wonder if we're really that close if I couldn't make a small sacrifice for her and her dog. That comment hurt a lot because I do care deeply for her, and I've always tried to be there for her. But this situation felt like it was being blown out of proportion. After some more time passed, Maya stopped trying to pressure me about bringing Bella over, but the tension still lingers. We've hung out a few times since, but I can tell she's still holding on to some resentment about the whole thing. I don't want to lose my sister over something like this, but I also don't want to feel like I'm being forced to accept something I'm genuinely uncomfortable with. I've tried to be respectful of her feelings and her bond with Bella, but at the same time, I feel like I'm entitled to my own space and boundaries. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister bring her dog to my house after she got upset that I don't like animals? Did I overreact? Or is she being unreasonable in expecting me to let a dog into my home just for the weekend? AITA for refusing to babysit my niece after my sister disrespected my boundaries for the third time? I, 29F, have an older sister, Lisa, 35F, and we've had a close relationship for most of our lives. However, recently things have started to feel strained, especially when it comes to my niece, Emma, 6. I love Emma, and I adore being an aunt, but there's an ongoing issue with my sister that I'm really struggling with. To give some context, Lisa has a demanding job and a busy life, which I understand can make parenting tough at times. She's married to Jake, 37M, and they both work full-time, leaving them with little time to take care of everything, like grocery shopping, cleaning, or finding someone to watch Emma when they need a break. Over the years, I've helped out in these situations, often babysitting Emma when they need a night off or when they have something work-related come up. However, the problem has been that every time I agree to help, my sister crosses boundaries that I've set. It started small at first. She would ask me to watch Emma for a few hours, which was totally fine. I love spending time with Emma, and it was no problem to lend a hand. But after a while, it became more frequent, and I started to feel like I was being taken for granted. She began asking for babysitting at the last minute, expecting me to drop everything for her convenience, without asking if I had other plans or commitments. The first time this happened, I had made plans with my friends to go out for dinner and drinks. I told Lisa I wouldn't be able to babysit because I had already committed to meeting up with them. She got upset and told me that I should have known she needed help and that it was selfish of me to prioritize my friends over her needs. It was uncomfortable, but I tried to let it slide. After all, I understand that being a parent is stressful, and sometimes things don't go as planned. But then it happened again. A few weeks later, she asked me to watch Emma for a whole Saturday so she and Jake could go to a wedding. I didn't have anything particularly important going on, so I agreed. However, when I got to her house, I was told that they wouldn't be back until late at night, and I ended up staying much longer than I expected. I ended up taking care of Emma for about 12 hours that day, and by the end of it, I was exhausted. I also felt taken advantage of, especially because I hadn't agreed to such a long day when she first asked. I let it slide because I didn't want to cause conflict, but I started setting boundaries. I told her I was happy to help, but if I was going to babysit, I needed enough notice, and I needed to be able to plan my schedule around it. I also told her that I could only commit to a few hours, and anything beyond that would need to be agreed upon in advance. But, once again, a few weeks ago, she completely disregarded those boundaries. She called me in the middle of the workday, asking if I could watch Emma that night, because she and Jake had to go to an important event for work. I had already planned a quiet evening at home to unwind from a stressful week, and I explained that to her. She said, "I get that you're tired, but I really need your help tonight. You're the only one I can rely on, and you know I'd do the same for you." I told her that I couldn't do it, and she immediately got upset. She said, "I really don't understand why you're being so selfish. I've always helped you out when you needed something, and now you're turning your back on me. It's not like I'm asking for anything unreasonable." I felt hurt by her response, and I reiterated that I wasn't turning my back on her. I just had plans that I couldn't cancel. She didn't take it well. She texted me later that night, saying, "I guess I'll just have to ask someone else since you can't be counted on." That text made me feel really guilty, but at the same time, I felt like I was being treated like a backup option and that my time didn't matter to her. After all, I'm an adult with my own responsibilities and commitments, and I didn't think it was too much to ask for her to respect my time. This situation really bothered me, and I decided I needed to have a conversation with her. I called Lisa a few days later and told her that I felt like my boundaries were being disrespected and that I wasn't comfortable with how often she expected me to drop everything for her. I told her that I love Emma and want to be there for her, but I need to be treated with more consideration. I also reminded her that I have my own life and commitments, and it wasn't fair to expect me to always put her needs above my own. She became defensive and told me I was being dramatic. She said, "You've always been the one to act like everything I do is too much. I'm just trying to make sure everything gets done, and I need you to help me. It's not like I'm asking for the world." She went on to say that she didn't understand why I couldn't just suck it up and help out when she needed me. I explained that I wasn't asking for much, but I needed her to start respecting my time and energy. I also told her that I couldn't be expected to always be the one to step in without any consideration for my own needs. She was silent for a moment, and then she said, "Well, if you're not willing to help me, then maybe I need to stop asking you. But don't come crying to me when you need something, and I'm too busy to help." At that point, I felt like I had to set a firmer boundary. I told her that I wouldn't be able to help her anymore unless she could respect my time and acknowledge the sacrifices I was making. I also said that I would be happy to help in the future, but only if it was planned in advance and if I was given more notice so that I could balance it with my own commitments. After that conversation, Lisa hasn't asked me for babysitting help since, but there's been a lot of tension between us. I can tell she's upset with me, and she hasn't really reached out as much lately. Every time we talk, there's an underlying awkwardness, and I can't shake the feeling that she's disappointed in me. I've been thinking a lot about this situation and wondering if I'm in the wrong. I love my niece and want to be there for her, but I also feel like my sister is taking advantage of me. I'll try to help out when I can, but I also feel like I need to take care of myself and set boundaries. Am I the asshole for refusing to babysit my niece after my sister disrespected my boundaries for the third time?